All right.
Okay,
Okay. How's it going, Dr. John?
it's going great. I'm
Yeah.
here at Sapo Ranch.
Good. Well, thank you for having us out here. We're trying to get the word out basically about these medicines and tell our story and how profoundly these medicines have affected our lives. It's just been amazing for us. It's just been a really big pivotal point, basically, being introduced to these medicines. And we're hoping to just kind of find out what your past is with the medicines, how you ended up serving these medicines.
Okay, it's an interesting story actually.
Excellent, excellent.
And
Let's
so
hear
let me just tell you a little bit about my background. I grew up in Texas. I went to college and medical school there, and then I moved in 1990 to New York City to do my residency training in psychiatry. And I went to a major hospital there in Manhattan, and got out and went into. I actually ran the inpatient psychiatric unit for a while in this hospital for a few years, and then I went into private practice and really spent about 25 years prescribing Big Pharma medications for everything you can imagine. You know, depression, anxiety, PTSD, addictions, schizophrenia, you know, the full gamut of psychiatric conditions. And up until 2016, had never done a psychedelic, had never even thought about it. In fact, I used to preach against them to my patients. I used to tell my patients how dangerous they were. And you know, sometimes patients would come in and they'd be curious about mushrooms, for example, or you know, LSD, psychedelics like that, and I would warn them, never do that. That'll fry your brain. You'll end up in the emergency room.
Yeah.
You know, because I was brainwashed from the medical system to view these psychedelics as really in a very negative way.
Right.
So, but I was getting very disillusioned with Western medicine and psychiatry, noticing that there weren't, you know, so many people weren't really getting better or healing, despite all these, you know, all this different medications that we were pushing and prescribing. And in 2016, some synchronicities led me to go to Brazil and try my first psychedelic, which was ayahuasca. So I ended up going to Brazil in a very skeptical mindset. You know, I'd never done anything like this before. And it was in 24 hours, it was an overnight experience. It was the most profound spiritual awakening I'd ever had. Up until that point in my life, I'd been atheistic, I'd been non-spiritual, very much a materialist, a scientific reductionist type. And I left Brazil the next day feeling like I had this whole new knowledge of the fact that we were really these souls, we were these spiritual beings in these temporary meat suits. And I came back to New York with a whole new mindset, and I was determined, based on that one ayahuasca session, I was determined to really do a deep dive into exploring these different medicines that are here on earth to help us heal. And that's one of the messages I got in that ayahuasca ceremony, was that it was really time for me to consider burning my prescription pad and start exploring, you know, these medicines, ayahuasca, the cactuses, the you know, the amphibian medicines.
Right.
So I really went on a sabbatical and spent a good year trying everything I could. You know, every weekend I was either trying a mushroom ceremony, I was trying more ayahuasca, I was doing research into these different compounds and different molecules, and really trying to get just you know, gain a lot of knowledge about them. And I was also very interested mainly I was interested in trying to apply these medicines to my patient population who weren't really experiencing healing with psychiatric medication.
Right.
So in about 2017, I experienced the toad medicine. Some people call it bufo, but I had the opportunity to try it with a person who was visiting the U.S. from Mexico, and I was served the medicine. And once I did the toad medicine, I realized that this is the medicine I've been waiting for. And so what I did, I actually worked with this guy who became my mentor and traveled around with him and became more familiar with the medicine. And then about a year later, started serving on my own. And what I started doing was working with a lot of my patients who hadn't really responded to the typical antidepressants or anti-anxiety medications. You know, veterans who had been very treatment resistant to different approaches for PTSD, for example. People who had depression and they'd been on 10, 15 different medications trying to target the depression, but hadn't really responded.
Right.
People who were suicidal and weren't responding to medication. So I really started working with these populations and found that the toad medicine was often very dramatic benefits in a very short time. Because this is we're talking about basically a 1 hour period where you have a session. Been so impressed with the results that for the past 8 years, this is all I've done is serve this medicine. And this is my whole practice now, is just trying to spread this medicine. I travel around the world working with it. And it's been a real game changer, I think, with many people that I've worked with. My colleagues initially thought I'd kind of lost my mind, when I came back from Brazil, and I said, listen, I'm going to start in this new path. I'm going to do all this research in these different plant medicines. And they thought I just had a psychedelic and went kind of crazy, but right. Now it's come full circle. A lot of my former colleagues are referring me their patients who aren't responding to their typical treatments. Wow. and finding some success in working with these. It's not always the toad. I often help people get on microdosing with mushrooms, for example, or I work with some ayahuasca facilitators that I'll refer people to if they're appropriate. Ibogaine and iboga are also really excellent treatments that I've referred people for with appropriate facilitators. So a lot of times I'm being a gateway for other medicines that I don't necessarily serve myself. But my medicine is the toad medicine. And let me just say, some people call it bufo. That's because the original name of these toads that are in the Sonoran Desert of northern Mexico, the original scientific name was Bufo alvarius. That's because they were called Bufo alvarius toads. People began calling this medicine bufo, smoking bufo, doing bufo. But about 15 years ago, scientists renamed the toads. So the official name of the toad is Encilius alvarius. So the name bufo is really kind of an obsolete term. Actually, about 450 different bufo species in the world. Different geographic regions have their own bufo toads.
Oh, really?
So there's Bufo canis, Bufo marinus. The interesting thing is the Bufo alvarius in northern Mexico were the only toads that produced this venom that contained the molecule 5-MeO-DMT. Okay. So because of this unique property, this unique molecule, that's what motivated scientists to change the name of the species and give them their own designation.
Gotcha. Do you have any kind of singular stories that stick out in your mind of patients that, obviously no names or anything, but
right.
Just to where they were dealing with a lot and you served this medicine and just kind of what the process was?
Well, you can look at these different categories, like addictions, for example. I've served many people who came in to do the medicine not necessarily because they felt like they had a problem with alcohol or opiates or other substances. They were coming in because they wanted a spiritual experience, and what they found was after this session, there was such a reset in their brain and nervous system that they never touched the substance they were abusing again. And they weren't expecting that. They didn't come in as part of their intention, but that was just one of the side effects, so to speak, of the experience. And I've seen that quite a few times. The other thing that's interesting is, so I've used it a lot for people who have treatment-resistant depression or PTSD, a lot of veterans who have been on every possible medication, every possible talk therapy that you can imagine to try to get to the root of their trauma. This is often severe trauma related to combat, for example, complicated, complex PTSD. And they'll tell you, an hour after smoking this venom and going through that, releasing that trauma, they'll come out of it and tell you that something finally shifted. They've experienced this reset. So it's been very impressive in that population. And the other thing that's worth noting is that the venom that these toads produce, the secretion, is there's 23 molecules in this venom. One of the molecules is the 5-MeO-DMT, but that's only about 20% of the venom. But the other 80% of the venom is composed of 22 other molecules, and a lot of them have very impressive anti-inflammatory properties. So there is this, you can see a lot of benefits in a person who have physical inflammation in the body, whether it's autoimmune disorder, asthma, lupus, arthritis, things like this. They'll often respond beautifully to this medicine because of the reduction in inflammation. So there's a lot of physical benefits.
Right. These are the side effects that we could list.
Yes, exactly. All side effects.
Much more positively.
Right.
Ask your doctor if bufo alvarius is right for you. Positive side effects include euphoria, enhanced creativity,
Just going back and thinking about like how I was keeping myself stuck in these positions and like pulling myself down and making life so much more difficult.
Right.
And I think one part of the back is being scared of death.
Yeah.
Just having that underlying fear of death, I think, was just a really big thing that I feel like disappeared.
Mm-hmm. No, and that brings up another population that I've worked with before, and these are people with end of life issues. You know, let's say they have a really serious illness, they have a really poor prognosis, they're given only months to live, and you can imagine the anxiety and the fear that comes up, you know, knowing that they're going to die soon. And you can have a person in that situation have this experience with a toad, and they come out of it and there's no more fear of their impending death. Right. And so it can be a really beautiful way of transitioning, you know, to have this experience before. And I've worked with some people who are death doulas and people who work in hospice settings where they're trying to find ways of getting this medicine into those populations. And it's been a kind of remarkable stories.
Right.
People coming out of it and being fully prepared to die, you know, right. in a peaceful way and in an accepting way. Yeah. Or family members also, you know, with the medicine being more comfortable with the loss that will occur.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, I know we're super grateful for the work that you do, and I'm sure there's thousands of people out there that are extremely grateful for the work that you do.
Well, I'm grateful for the work you're doing, spreading this, spreading this information, and bringing your, you know, there's ripple effects from this. Every person that I think experiences this this reset with the toad medicine, this is an experience that raises your frequency. And even though you may not be aware of it, I think that there's these ripples, people around you react to that frequency, and that's how these seeds get planted, and more people come to the medicine.